and welcome to today's Q&A Friday. Let's get straight into these questions because we've got quite a few to do.
We have, yeah. First up is from Cindy Gagnon, who wants to know the blender brand that we use to make our smoothies.
That's a quick one. It's an Alpha-Wise commercial blender. It's a copy of the Vitamix, but it only cost about £100, so it's much cheaper.
Yeah, it is, and it works just as well. It's a great blender. We haven't had any problems with it.
Nope.
Next question from Larry Cope, who's asking two questions actually. The first one, after living for a couple of years now in Portugal, what has surprised you most about the country? For me, what springs to mind first of all is how quiet the quiet areas actually are. So I still get surprised that when we drive through places and we don't see anybody for ages in the little villages in the rural parts of Portugal. That is always quite surprising.
For me, I was surprised most at how Eastern European the language sounds. We've had people come and visit us saying, oh, there was loads of Russian people on the plane. I was like, that's not Russian, that's Portuguese.
Yeah.
And also I was surprised at how cold the winters got. You know about that, we've been talking about that quite a lot in the videos.
Yeah.
That's mostly it for me.
One more for me is how diverse each area is. If you go to from here to the Algarve, you feel like you're in a completely different country.
Yeah, like an individual holiday.
And Larry's second question is, what traits attracted you to each other when you first met?
Oh, it was so long ago.
This is quite a difficult question because when we first met we were 11 years old,
exactly.
and we were children and we were friends and that kind of thing. We got quite a slow burning relationship.
Yeah. It started very slowly. There were other relationships involved, weren't there? Other kids were interested in you, and loads of stuff kind of like panned out, but we eventually got together when we were 16 years old.
I think for me, one thing that I've always admired about you that's different from me is how determined you are about stuff. Like you've always been like that ever since school. Like once you think about something, that's it. You're just focused on doing that, and that's like your goal, and you don't do anything else until that goal's done, which also can be quite annoying.
Yeah, and it can actually be a problem because it's a little bit like tunnel vision.
It is,
and, you know, I only get that thing done and then nothing else gets done. So.
But that is, I think, one of the main things, your determination. Oh, and I also I've always loved, we can go to any country in the world and you just get in a car and drive.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no matter what car it is, what country it is, like, whether you've been there before or anything like that, it's always impressed me.
Well,
like, when we first arrived in Morocco, and it was crazy, and we just picked up the car from the airport and off we went, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool that you can do this.
I was talking to my mum about that the other day, and I said that I got that from my dad. He was like that when we were kids. I was always impressed at how he could just take us anywhere without knowing anything about the country, and I said to myself back then, I want to be able to do that. And so even if I'm scared, I do it. So for me, I've always been really impressed with how caring you are with animals and people. And like when you were doing your old work in the hospital, some of the stories I heard when you came home, I was like, I'm not sure if I could do that type of work, and it just seemed to kind of go naturally with who you were, and you're still like that now, and that's one of the things that I've always loved about Sash.
Next question is from Jill Eslinger. What's the scariest moment or experience you've had in your travels? Where were you ever really concerned about your own safety?
I'll let you answer that first.
Okay, I've got one. But one quite scary moment was when we were first in Thailand, the first year that we lived there, in the old Ford Escort, and we were driving up a super steep hill on the Mae Hong Song Loop, and the car broke. I can't even remember what was wrong with it. Something snapped.
The accelerator.
We had a big ping, and the car snapped. It was getting dark. We were on the way to a hotel. We had eaten in the car, obviously, loads of luggage and stuff, and we had no idea where we were. Jay managed to fix the car with a spanner or something.
Yeah, it was an adjustable spanner. I attached it to the accelerator cables and clamped it together, and then we drove the rest of the way. I didn't really think that was scary for you though.
Well, it wasn't. I guess at the time it was just like, this is what's happening right now. But I remember getting out of the car and there was an amazing view and it was getting dark. I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, where are we? And there was no other cars. No, it wasn't like we could house someone down and say, can you help us? We were on our own in the middle of a mountain that we'd never been in before.
Well, I've got a question for you then. That happened about 4 more times afterwards. Did you feel as scared after that?
No. But if I was on my own driving, then I would have been scared.
Yeah, well, that's why you never were on your own in that car. Yeah, it was a bit ropey.
Yeah.
Well, then, for me, one of my travel experiences that I was really scared was when I was with my dad in India. I actually texted you because I thought I was going to die. I was on this really dodgy bus ride with my dad, and there was like no suspension in the bus. Every time we was going over a bump, we were flying out of our seats, and they were going through these mountain roads, and he was overtaking everything. And then he got to, like, the driver was overtaking another bus, and there was something else coming the other way, and no one was stopping. And then they slammed on the brakes, there was no brakes. It was just ridiculous. It was an accident waiting to happen, and it just didn't happen. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to get off this bus alive.
I know, but I read it as a kind of joke. I didn't actually take it seriously until I spoke to Jay, and he was like, actually, that was super bad.
And that wasn't the first time we had a bus experience.
That happened when we travelled in India, the same thing, and the bus actually did crash.
Yeah.
It hit a cow, didn't it?
No, it hit a motorbike. There was a
to
man...
avoid a cow.
Yeah, he slammed on the brakes again. There were no brakes, and he slammed into this guy on a motorbike, and they had to carry him off. They carried, like, the villagers all came down, picked up the guy, and they just kind of like crowd surfed him all the way to the medic.
One more, just a quick one. This has been quite a long question, but it was when we were in Thailand again, and we'd done a border run in Ranong over to Burma on the boat. When we came back, they were questioning us quite deeply, and they took our passports away, and we had to go and sit in the immigration office, and everyone was kind of ignoring us for a bit, and we were like, we weren't sure what was going on, and we asked to speak to the manager and all this kind of stuff. Oh goodness, how do we play this to get our passports back and get back to Eden, who was sitting in a hotel by herself?
Yeah, they basically, they weren't letting us back in the country. You didn't say that.
Yeah, oh, did I not?
No, you didn't say it. They basically, the guy that let us go over to do the border run, it was a different woman on the way back, and she said, oh, we shouldn't have let you go over with this particular visa you've got, so you're not allowed back in to the country. And we had to basically beg her to reconsider because of what her other staff member had said. And then after a little bit of talking, she was like, cool, but never come back here again.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, I won't.
We didn't. Next question from Michelle Rodriguez, who's asking, Sasha, I'm glad you're back safe. Our question is, when you came back here for a few days, as in the UK, did it bring up feelings of wanting to move back on a permanent basis? I have to be honest here, and yes, it did. So we are going to touch on this a little bit more on some other questions that we've got, but it did, and my headspace when I initially came back for the first few days was a little bit unsettled. Yes, it has brought up some feelings about moving back to England permanently, which then leads on to a question from Sherilyn Sherma, who's saying, you both talk about buying a home, maybe in Portugal, but if, as you said today, you'd maybe love to go back to England or find another place, would you consider to continue to rent and not buy to save you from the frustration of selling as well as moving when the time comes?
Well, I'll answer this. I think that the thing that we really want is a home. And when we choose that home, we would want to buy it, because one of the major problems with renting is the place is never yours. So it can never really feel like home. There are times when it does, and then one little spark can change, don't feel like home anymore. And that's happened to us multiple times around the world. The next time we choose a place that we want to stay permanently, yes, we definitely do want to buy it when we can afford to do so.
I think initially we would rent, like if we were to go back to the UK.
Oh yeah, we would have to.
We would rent to begin with, and it also gives an opportunity to look into the area more deeply. If it's not an area that we grew up in or we know, then renting is a good idea because it allows you to get your feet wet and
it's all we've ever done as well.
Exactly,
isn't it?
It's what we know. So we would do that for like a year maybe, to then look at buying, and then that way we would know the areas because we've been living in the area for X amount of time already.
I just heard Story.
Yeah.
She's up from her little nap. Hello, sweet girl. Yeah, you want to sit on Story's chair?
Okay, that's Mummy's chair really, but we'll share it. Okay. You don't want your socks on, okay.
You okay there?
Next question is from Nathan Siri. Can you say Nathan?
Nathan.
Good girl. And his question is, what made you decide to move to Portugal? Had you considered other countries before you guys picked Portugal?
The main thing that made us choose this country was, number one, the cost of living for where it is in Europe, and the weather. The house that we found was suitable for Eden because it had a large garden.
Yeah.
And we did consider moving to the Philippines before we came here as didn't we? Because we'd just been there for a holiday. It was similar to Thailand, but it was different as well. And we've got family that live there, so we thought it would be nice to try that out.
Mainly because I was pregnant at the time, the thought of having a baby in Europe was a bit better than staying in Asia to give birth and give Story her first few months.
The idea was a bit more comfortable, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just mainly to be closer to home, and Portugal was the
A bridge.
closest we could get to UK, but with a similar cost of living to what we were used to.
And a better climate.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a bridge country, really, but it's been good to us.
Yeah. Next question from Vitor Madeira. Considering that from 3 years onwards, public Portuguese schools are 100% free, would you consider to put Story in a public school, preschool as we call it here, before the first grade, which is when children turn 6? Well, Story's got another whole year until she's 3. But we're not considering putting her in a preschool here as such.
I think one of the main reasons why we're not thinking of putting Story in the public school is because I was speaking to some mothers in the park in Mortágua a couple of months ago, and they said that when you send your child to the Portuguese schools from the very early ages of infancy onwards, they feed the child, they give them milk, they have quite a bit of control over the daily routine of your child. I don't think we'll be able to fully explain our wants and needs for Story, and I feel like they would have too much jurisdiction over her at this point. Especially where we live, there is a huge language barrier between English and Portuguese. If you can speak French or Portuguese, you're okay, but when you speak English, even the people that do speak English to you, there are a lot of misunderstandings, and I don't feel comfortable putting Story in the school not knowing that they actually understand what we think she needs. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're probably not going to do it. Something that we did consider to do as an alternative, and we're still looking into it, is signing Story up for fun classes that she might enjoy. Like a dance class, a ballet class. There's one in Coimbra for kids, so she gets that good interaction with other children.
But again, that doesn't start until 3
years old.
So
yeah,
she's still too young for a lot of stuff. So right now we're not too worried about that kind of thing.
Hopefully that it kind of explains what we're thinking. It's going to be the first time we give our child over to somebody else, and I want to know that those people really understand what Story's about and what we're about before we do that.
Yeah, this also goes with the next question from Sue Herring, and she's wondering if we're going to put Story in a local nursery before starting school, and when she does go to school, will it be in the UK or Portugal?
Well, like we said, she won't probably go to the nurseries, but we do think that between now and 3, maybe she'll get some time doing some classes.
Yeah, I think for us it's easier to find schools in the UK, the kind of schools that we would like her to go to. It's much easier to come by in the UK. So that's what we're looking at the moment, but she wouldn't start until 5 or 6 anyway.
And before that time comes, we are planning on doing a few sections of travelling with her so she can learn from the world and from the people and the children that she meets around the world, and maybe she can do classes there too when she gets old enough to enjoy more things. So if anybody out there is worried about Story's interaction, something I also wanted to mention, she does interact with kids a fair amount. Like whenever we're out, we always allow her to go up to anybody she wants to, you know, within proximity to us. And if she's in the supermarket, if she's in the park, if there's anybody around, adults or kids, Story will run up to them and give them a hello. Sometimes she gives them a big cuddle and stuff, and we're always there to say hello and to just kind of show her that interacting with other people is good. So just because you don't see her in the vlogs always interacting with people, know that not everybody gets filmed, and she does have interactions with people more than you see. But when it comes to full-blown long-term like relationships with people and like going to classes and stuff, it's going to be from 3 years onwards. And right now we feel like we're giving her a pretty good start here at home, teaching her about stuff and how to interact with people as much as we can until that time.
And the final question from Yin Yin Lin, who says, would you mind sharing the model name and number of your video camera, please?
Well, we use 4 cameras, but the one we're using right now is the Sony A5100. It's a good vlogging camera. I think we talked about it already. The other camera uses the Sony RX100 Mark V, which is the one that does all the slow motion shots. And then we've got two big Canon SLR cameras, the 5D Mark II and the 60D. And those are all the cameras we use to make our videos.
Yeah.
Well, that took longer to film than I thought it was going to, actually. So we've had to run some questions over again until next week.
Yeah.
But thank you to everybody that's partaking in this.
It's fun, I like doing them.
Yeah,
It's good.
it's a good way for us to get across some of the stuff that gets missed in the vlogs.
Yeah.
And we hope you're enjoying them too. Remember, if you want to guarantee to get your question looked at and answered, you have to put your question on patreon.com/8 miles from home. There's a public post on there that says Q&A Friday. And in the comments, that's where we get all the questions from. So if you've asked something through some other medium and we haven't seen it or we haven't got to it, just put it there because that's where we look primarily. Links below, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Goodness. Okay. Big mistake.
Look, they've got huge gun turrets here. What a place. And what a view too. They set it up to protect Portugal's coastline, but it was never used. Don't really get to see stuff like this, do you? What a fantastic view for water, eh? The fortress itself is just up there on the hill. We drove past it on the way in. Let's have a look inside one of them.